Well, good evening. Thank you for joining us for our midweek connection. Cam, thanks for being here. So glad that you guys are joining us tonight. We're actually filming this in a little bit of a different location, just a preview of the set that we're using for our next round of filming worship and sermons, which I'm really excited about, both what we're doing, the content that we're talking about, but
House Church.
Yes, that this represents us moving into a new phase, a new season for Element Church. And so I'm sure most of you have heard. If you have not, we're moving into phase 2 of our reopening plan, which we've called House Church. Yep. And we have houses all over Aurora, and we're asking everyone in our church, those who are healthy enough and in a good stage of health and life that they can do this, to sign up for one of those house churches. Come join us as we worship together on Sunday morning, starting this Sunday. And so if you have not, maybe you've kind of checked them out, you've kind of been a little shy about pulling the trigger, like this is the time to do it, because we would love to get everyone assigned into homes. And we're doing a sign up process because it allows us to control which house fills up, you know what I mean? And if a house gets too full, then we can direct people other places. So while there's still time, you can jump in, find out which house is best for you location-wise, or maybe just one of your good friends is at that house. Sign up.
All the cool kids are going there.
It's true. There is one of those houses.
Right.
But
we're told we're not allowed.
Yeah. But we would love for you, jump online. The links will be posted on Church Online, Facebook Live. Jump on, click the link. Pick your house out. We're going to worship together this Sunday. I'm really excited for this. Yeah. It'll be good.
And if it doesn't work out for you, for your life situation or whatever, to be able to meet, we will still have it online, so you can still access it the way you've been doing the last couple of weeks.
For sure. So, but to jump into the content for today, on Sunday, we kind of talked about the conclusion of like this little season that we've been covering from essentially what happened after the resurrection to the start of the church. We talked about Jesus spending 40 days with his disciples preaching about the kingdom. Then we covered the disciples spending about a week or a little over a week in prayer, and then what happens at the conclusion. And that event we often call Pentecost. And so you might have been with us on Sunday morning and you kind of have some idea of what took place there and why it's called that. But maybe just pushing those details aside, what do you think of when you hear the word Pentecost? Like, what comes to mind? And I'm guessing, depending on what Christian tradition you grew up in, you might be thinking some different things.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, for sure.
Now with that, and you started with Pentecost, talking about that, and you mentioned how Pentecost, the name of that event, actually comes because it was celebrated, or the event happened on the celebration of a Jewish holiday, also known as Pentecost. I was wondering, in these moments where you have a midweek connection where we can go a little deeper, can you provide us some details on that? What was the Jewish celebration, Pentecost?
Yeah, so Pentecost is just the Greek name for the Jewish festival. We often refer to it as like the Festival of Harvest or the Festival of Weeks. Hebrew Shavuot is the name of the celebration. And in Jewish tradition, there are 3 festivals or 3 holidays, you could say, where generally they would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And there is where they would worship. Now, not everyone did that, but a lot of people would. And so Pentecost comes 50 days after Passover. That's how it gets the Greek name Pentecost, from Penta for 50. And so 50 days after Passover was another opportunity where Jewish families would come. A lot of times just men would come, but sometimes families, and they would come for this specific celebration that is called Pentecost. And so the events that we read about in Acts chapter 2 just so happen to take place on that holiday. And that's kind of how it gets its name.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it had happened at that time, right? I don't think there's any, it wasn't just a happenstance that it happened to be a lot of people in Jerusalem of foreign tongues at a time when the events that then followed in Pentecost.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why there was such a huge crowd in Jerusalem, and everyone was interested in what's going on, and everyone already had their minds attuned to kind of spiritual things and God being at work, because they were there for this Jewish festival and holiday.
Yeah, and then you outlined how after those 10 days of getting together and devoting themselves to prayer, the Holy Spirit moves, and Luke tries to capture kind of what it's like, such a unique event like that, but then they start speaking all in native tongues that they didn't know previously, which creates some confusion, right? Some people start freaking out, and they actually think that they're drunk. So I love that Peter starts his first sermon, or at least the first sermon we know of, by saying, no, we're not drunk, You know what
else I love? I love that Luke includes that detail.
Yes.
Like if you're summarizing the story, like Like there's so many big things that happen, and Luke, as he's writing this out, like just wants to throw it out. Like I just think that's funny.
Which gives it more credibility that these actually happen. Who you wouldn't make that up,
Right.
That's not something that comes up. But when Peter launches into a sermon, you talk about how he sort of mentions, hey, while these events are new, the ideas behind them aren't new.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could detail some of those ideas that he was referring to.
Yeah, so as the crowd gathers to kind of figure out what in the world is going on, Peter takes the opportunity to preach a sermon. And he's like, hey, everyone, let me tell you what's going on. And in order to communicate this, he's going to try to relate to his audience, all who are Jewish and understand their Jewish heritage and background. So he goes back into their story and says, hey, let's back up a couple hundred years and let's talk about how our God has been working towards this, how these events have been foretold, and that, like you said, like while the events are new, the resurrection, the appearances of Jesus, and all of these things, the ascension, and now the Holy Spirit falling, these are new. The ideas aren't. God has been preparing for this for a long time.
Yeah, and I love a line that Peter has in there, and he says, all who are far away, right? This is not just for the religious elite or the goody two-shoe type people, right? This is for all who are far away.
Yeah.
Which we wanted to open up for a discussion question for you guys. Has there been a time in your life where you felt like you were far away, maybe too far away, that you were not able to receive God's mercy? And then within that, how can we minister to those who in our world today maybe feel far away, or we would look at and think of as being far away?
Sure, that's good. Whether they would label themselves
Yeah.
as that, or maybe other people would label them as that, like who are far from God.
Now, so after that, the church is launched, right? And you sort of detailed that early church experience. I wondered if you could go in a little deeper. We've sort of touched on it in previous weeks on Midweek Connection on this development of the early church, because it's natural for a lot of people in the Christian community to look back at the early church and go, we want to emulate that, right? And oftentimes people focus on certain elements of it, right? But there's a sort of spirit side and a structure side to that piece, and I wondered if you could detail some of that.
Sure. Well, like you kind of get this phrase, people use it a lot, where like, hey, we just want to go back to being like the church in Acts. And my first thought is generally like, well, which one? Because Acts covers a span of 30 years.
Good point.
You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of differences between the very early days when there was no system, no structure. They were just devoted to this new ministry and mission Jesus had just handed off to them. And they're trying to figure it out. And they're just passionate about sharing the news. Now, as they grow, they just organically start to develop more structure and systems and leadership, just because they realize that it's helpful. Like if we're going to be,
you need it.
if we're going to be, maximize our gospel impact. Then let's put these things in place. And so, but the early church was just very like raw and organic. They were gathering together in the temple courts. They were gathering in homes. They were devoting themselves to prayer and the apostles' teaching. They were sharing food and fellowship with one another. They were sharing even their possessions with one another. Like we just realizing like we're in this together.
Yeah, that spirit of like radical unity and love that was going on. But I do love that point of mentioning that they're, as soon as they get a chance, they're building structure into it.
Sure.
They're building elders. They're doing all sorts of stuff because of the need for that.
Yeah, right.
Now within that, we're moving into a new stage in our church, right, where we're going to go to house church. And I really appreciated that you took the time at the end to say, hey, this is not sort of church light, right? This is not sort of secondary. I was wondering if you could recap some of that and what you were talking about within there.
Yeah, well, just that like us meeting together in homes isn't like we're settling for second best or now granted, when we can meet all together, we're going to because we love bringing everyone together.
Seeing everybody
and worshiping together, and there is something powerful when you have everyone together and we get to see each other. But us meeting in homes is not, we're not settling. Like that's even how the first church began. Now they took opportunities to meet all together when they could, but that's not always how they met. And they met in homes. They shared their lives and their homes with one another. And so when we can, we want to meet all together. But right now, like we are still being the church, even as we meet in homes in smaller groups. And so it's just important to recognize that like, yes, it's different, but it is still a full expression of what the church is.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't go to church, you are the church. Right?
That's right.
And I think it's a cool time to reflect on the fact that we are joining a huge portion of the universal church right now today
Yeah.
that are meeting in churches elsewhere in the world, like
What-
China and other places where you have an underground church.
What we'll be doing on Sunday, we will be in alignment with more Christians around the world than we are when we're meeting in a building.
That's a really cool point. Yeah. No.
Like the majority of Christians around the world, that's how they meet. Either by necessity, there's no land or property,
Yeah.
or, well, I guess it's still by necessity, but because of like that's to stay underground of governments and things. And so we'll be in unity with a lot more Christians doing what we're doing on Sunday than normal.
Just gave me goosebumps.
It's cool.
I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So within that, our final discussion question we want to throw to you guys is, as we reflect on sort of that spirit of the early church and some of these things that we learned about, how does that shape how we approach house church and our hearts that we bring to it, just our spirit that we bring to it, but then also how does it change the way we reflect on church and the way we approach church, even when we get back together as a big group?
That's
whenever
good.
that happens.
That's good. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for our church. I'm excited for this new season.
Yes.
And I said it on Sunday, and I genuinely believe it. Like, I think this is a unique moment and opportunity where we're going to see God move in some really cool ways.
Yeah, he's not caught off guard.
No, he's not. And I think what we're doing at House Church is built upon this last week of prayer that we, praying Thy Kingdom Come. And it was really cool that we were able to pray about the church, at Universal Element Church specifically. And then it was just special this week connecting with people in prayer because we could pray about some very culturally relevant things that are happening in our country. Yeah. And we could just stop and pray about those things as well. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great time and just the flow of our nation right now. To
for sure. For sure. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We're going to have a Zoom talk. An opportunity just to talk about these things, kind of go through some of these questions and catch up on life too. Yeah. And so if you're available, if you're watching this live, we're going to open up the Zoom right away and we'll chit chat and catch up on life. Right. And then at 6:30, we begin the actual discussion questions and getting more on topic and focus. And so we would love for you to join us. So links for that Zoom group are going to be shared in the online platform, Facebook Live. We would love for you to jump in.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Cameron, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys in just a little bit.